Hey guys, today we'll be taking a look at the state of Pennsylvania and the two elections that we have there this year, the Senate and governor elections, and how much of a disaster they have been for the Republican Party. I mean, Pennsylvania should be an easily winnable state for the GOP in a year in which there is a Democratic president. However, John Fetterman, according to the latest poll, leads over amendment odds by 9%, and Josh Shapiro is ahead of Doug Mastriano by a full 12 percentage points. And this is the same poll that shows Joe Biden ahead of Donald Trump by just 1%. Fetterman is outperforming Joe Biden by 8% and Shapiro by 11%. And this most recent poll is just one of many showing the Democrats dominating in the state of Pennsylvania. John Fetterman led by 4%, 6%, and 9% according to the three polls released last month for the Senate election. And on the gubernatorial level, Josh Shapiro led by 3% and 4% last month. Now he is up by 11%. Shapiro is now outperforming John Fetterman. So the GOP really should not be in this poor of a position in a state like Pennsylvania. They won Pennsylvania in 2016 with Donald Trump. In 2020, Trump barely lost Pennsylvania to Joe Biden. In Joe Biden's home state, he was born in the state of Pennsylvania. So the Republican Party, considering that Joe Biden's approval rating looks like this, should not be having this much trouble in Pennsylvania. And the reason for their struggles really is not the party itself, but the candidates that they are running. So if you look at the GOP primaries in Pennsylvania, you saw that they nominated Mehmet Oz, who won 31.2% of the vote. He barely defeated David McCormick. He won this primary by less than 1,000 votes. I think McCormick would have been a much more electable candidate, but Mehmet Oz, with the endorsement of Donald Trump, won the race by a margin of 0.1%. If you look at the governor primary here, Doug Mastriano won 43.8% of the vote. Donald Trump also supported Mastriano. However, the mainstream Republicans were heavily against his nomination, and so basically all of the anti-Mastriano vote was split by a number of candidates, and he ended up coming out on top. He did not win a majority, but he did win a much larger plurality than Mehmet Oz. So both of these candidates were able to win their primaries. However, in a general election that doesn't just include the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, they're going to face a much tougher race. And so looking at the 538 forecast, Democrats are now favored to win the Senate. They have a 51% chance at controlling the Senate majority after these midterms. And if you look at the map here, Pennsylvania is a toss-up state still, but John Fetterman now has a 57% chance of winning. In 57 out of the 40,000 simulations that 538 runs, John Fetterman comes out on top. I mean, there are some scenarios where he wins 58% of the vote. The largest percentage that Mehmet Oz wins in these scenarios is just 55%. If you look at the chances of winning for both candidates and how it's changed over time, I mean, the numbers for Democrats have been increasing ever since this forecast was launched at the beginning of this month. If you look at Fetterman's chances just 2 months ago on the 1st of June, he had a 35% chance of winning. This race went from being lean Republican to now being tilt Democratic. If you look at the popular vote, currently John Fetterman is expected to win by a margin of 1.3%. So still a very close race, but a clear advantage for the Democrats. If you look at the polling that has been done here, Fetterman, of course, has led in every single one of the polls released. And this is the deluxe model, which means that they use polling data, fundraising numbers, past voting patterns, and expert ratings. If you look at the light version of this forecast based solely on the polls, John Fetterman has an 81% chance at winning this election. So really, the Democratic Party is clearly favored here, and 538's forecast shows that very well. Now, if you want to look at a different forecast, I have here the Decision Desk HQ model, and they categorize Pennsylvania as being a toss-up race as well. They currently give John Fetterman a 53% chance at victory, 46.2 for Mehmet Oz, and if you look at the odds for both parties just a couple of months ago, I mean, it was 70-30 in favor of the GOP, and if you look at the polls that they have added to this model, they have not even included this most recent blueprint poll showing Democrats ahead by 9%. So once this poll is added to the DDHQ model, the odds for John Fetterman are going to increase once again. And so looking at the Senate map here, this is based on the 538 forecast, and so if you fill in all of the likely lean and solid states, what you see here is that you have 3 remaining toss-up races: Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the only one of these 3 toss-up races that Republicans currently hold, but if Democrats flip Pennsylvania, which currently they are expected to do, the chances of victory for Republicans is going to decrease significantly because the Democratic Party is favored in both Georgia and Nevada. In both of these these states, Democrats do have incumbents, and Raphael Warnock is a particularly strong incumbent in Georgia, and he is polling much better than Herschel Walker. And if you look at the governor election there in Georgia, Brian Kemp is leading over Stacey Abrams. So while Republicans are expected to win the governor election in Georgia, Democrats are currently expected to win the Senate election there. And so that is why it will be very difficult for Republicans to win, because if they want to win back the Senate, they will have to win both of these races if Pennsylvania goes blue. Now, looking at the 538 forecast for the governor election, Doug Mastriano is in trouble. If you look at this forecast, they categorize Oregon as a lean Democratic state, giving Tina Kotek just a 69% chance of winning. But if you look at the Pennsylvania race, they currently categorize Pennsylvania as a likely Democratic state, giving Josh Shapiro an 80% chance at victory against Doug Mastriano. If you look at this forecast based solely on the polls, it's actually worse for Shapiro. If you look at the light model, Shapiro has a 78% chance at victory. The deluxe model actually gives him an 80% chance at victory. So looking at the 2018 governor election in Pennsylvania, basically Tom Wolf won his re-election by a very solid margin against Scott Wagner. In 2022, we're not going to see the same thing from Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro is not the incumbent running for his re-election. There's no way he's going to win by a solid margin in a year like 2022. However, he is still probably going to end up winning. If you look at the model here, they currently give Shapiro the highest odds he's had throughout the summer, and looking at the popular vote, currently Josh Shapiro is expected to win by around 6%, 5.9% to be exact, and looking at all the polls, I mean, Josh Shapiro is clearly ahead here. So Doug Mastriano, I think, is actually a much worse candidate than Mehmet Oz. Mastriano simply has a lot more extremist views. Mehmet Oz's problem is that he's just literally not from the state, does not even live in the state, has not been actively campaigning in the state, and has changed his position on so many things as he's now running for office. And so Josh Shapiro right now, an 80% chance of victory, I think is very accurate. Doug Mastriano is somebody that has struggled to even get the endorsement of the GOP Governors Association. The ARPGA has not even endorsed Doug Mastriano, and it's been, I mean, over 2 months since he won his primary. And so one of the biggest problems for Doug Mastriano is his views on abortion rights. And after Roe v. Wade was overturned, this has become an even larger issue. He does not believe that women should be able to get an abortion even if they're raped or molested. And that is going to be a big issue for GOP voters as well. And that is why the RGA has not gotten behind Doug Mastriano. A lot of his other extremist views are not popular within the mainstream Republican Party either. And so if you look at the odds right now for Doug Mastriano, the Republican Party was favored to win this race before he won the nomination. Before Mastriano was the Republican nominee, before it looked like he would win, the GOP had a 2-in-3 chance at winning the election in late April. Now, they have a 32% chance at victory. After Roe v. Wade was overturned, Doug Mastriano's views were exposed. I mean, his odds continue to go down. And so the reason why his views on abortion are going to have such a big impact on Pennsylvania is because if you look at the state legislatures, they are controlled by the GOP. Right now, the only thing preventing the state of Pennsylvania from banning abortions outright is the fact that they have a Democratic governor in Tom Wolf, who was reelected, of course, in 2018. But the fear is that if Mastriano wins, he is going to overturn abortion rights for the people of Pennsylvania, and that is why people are unwilling to vote for him. Most people in this country are pro-choice. Most Democrats are pro-choice. Of course, most independents are pro-choice as well, and most people in the state of Pennsylvania are pro-choice. And so if you have a candidate who is selling himself as the one that will overturn abortion rights with no exceptions, it really is not going to play well for that guy. And so looking at the betting odds for the Senate election, we see a very similar pattern to the gubernatorial one. We both see the Republicans favored in this race before the primaries occurred, but right after the primaries, the race got a lot closer, and here on the Senate level, John Fetterman took the lead after the polls were released in mid-June, showing him up significant margins against Mehmet Oz. Now, the only saving grace right now for Mehmet Oz is that in 2016, the polls did get it wrong in Pennsylvania. Pat Toomey was expected to lose his election, and there is a history of polls overestimating Democrats in Pennsylvania. If you look at the 2016 polls, Pat Toomey was expected, basically based on every single poll that was released in the final days leading up to the election, he was expected to lose, and Katie McGinty was expected to replace him. However, Pat Toomey ended up winning the race by 1.4%. This was the second closest race of the year, only behind behind the election in New Hampshire between Maggie Hassan and Kelly Ayotte, but really Pennsylvania was a state that the Democrats were expected to win in 2016, but of course in the end Pat Toomey won his race and Donald Trump won the election on the presidential level as well. However, you do have to note the fact that this was in a presidential election year. 2022 is not going to be a presidential election year, obviously. It is going to be a midterm year, and so that does make it a little bit different. Pat Toomey was able to ride off the popularity that Donald Trump had in Pennsylvania over Hillary Clinton, and that of course did help him win the race last time around. And if you look at these most recent polls, I mean, John Fetterman is a better candidate than Katie McGinty, and he is actually polling better than McGinty did in 2016. So yes, John Fetterman may not do as well as the poll suggests. I think that is clear. John Fetterman is not going to win by 9%, and Josh Shapiro is not going to win by 11%, even though, yes, Tom Wolf did have a very solid victory here last time. I do think the margin is going to be still remaining in the single digits, but right now I do expect John Fetterman to win his election, despite the fact that he is probably going to underperform the polls. If you look at the 2020 presidential election here in the state of Pennsylvania, you did see Joe Biden underperform. He of course won the state by 1.2%, but was ahead by 4.7% on the polling average on election day. Basically every single poll showed him winning, and he only won by a very small margin. So yes, Democrats are expected to underperform once again in the Keystone State, but still they are doing well enough right now that even if they were to underperform significantly, they would still end up winning. And the final thing I want to look at in this video is the fundraising numbers for the Senate race here. If you look at the fundraising between Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman, John Fetterman has raised $25.8 million, 18.9 for Mehmet Oz, basically $19 million. However, if you look closer and look at the amount of money they've been able to raise from small individual contributions, this is where John Fetterman absolutely obliterates Mehmet Oz. He has raised over 20 times the amount of money from these small contributions, and these small contributions is what shows grassroots support. Of course, Bernie Sanders was famous for having a lot of money contributed from these small individual donations, and if you look at the numbers for Mehmet Oz, he has raised $792,000. Compare that to John Fetterman's $15.1 million. So basically, by every single metric right now, John Fetterman is expected to flip the state of Pennsylvania on the Senate level. And this is despite Joe Biden having a negative 27% approval rating in the state. He currently is approved by just 31% of people in Pennsylvania, according to Civics. Now, the poll in Civics is going to be a lot less favorable to whoever is in office than it actually is, because these are online responses, so you'd be a lot more inclined to fill this out if you disapproved of Joe Biden. So the numbers are going to be a bit better realistically for Joe Biden, but still, he is nowhere near the positives in the state of Pennsylvania, nowhere near a double-digit lead. And so, you know, if you look at the latest polls that have been released for the actual races that we're seeing this year, Joe Biden is doing a lot worse than these candidates, and so this really just goes to show you how Joe Biden's popularity is not having as much of an effect on this year's midterm elections than Republicans would like to hope. Looking at the generic ballot numbers, Republicans are ahead by just a margin of 0.7%. This is their lowest point since the very beginning of this year. And so despite Joe Biden's numbers continuing to go down, the numbers for Democrats nationwide have gone up since the beginning of this month. They have basically been cut in 3, the margin for the GOP. If you look at the latest polls, most of them do show Democrats ahead. So right now, the Democratic Party is in good standing nationwide, and especially in the 2 elections that we have in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, this was a state that voted for Trump in 2016, barely for Joe Biden in 2020, a state that should be much more competitive than it is right now. But I mean, basically, all of the numbers show it. The betting odds, the forecast numbers, as well as, of course, fundraising and the polls, they all show Democrats dominating in Pennsylvania with John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below who you think will win the Senate and governor elections in Pennsylvania. Subscribe to my channel if you have not, and I'll see you guys in the next video.